I'm Allison Parker, 27 years old and a licensed physical therapist. Last year, my brother texted me a sentence that fractured my world: "Stay away from us." I hadn't done anything but speak the truth and try to protect him from the woman who would eventually leave me bloodied at the bottom of a concrete stairway. Growing up, Garrett and I were unshakable partners in everything. We never imagined we'd become strangers. But love can blind, and lies can bury even the strongest bonds between siblings. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments and tap that like button. If you've ever watched someone you love change right in front of you and felt powerless to stop it. I was born and raised in Portland, Oregon, with my brother Garrett just 3 years older than me, after our parents divorced when I was 10 and he was 13. We learned quickly how to depend on each other. Our mom, Lisa, had primary custody, but every other weekend we'd pack up and spend time with our dad, James. Those transitions weren't always easy, but Garrett made them bearable when kids whispered about our split family or when I felt lost at school. He was always there, walking me to class, giving me that half grin that told me everything would be okay in high school. We started growing into our own lanes. Garrett joined the basketball team and business club, while I found my rhythm in dance and anatomy classes, but our differences never pulled us apart. We shared everything from toothpaste to fears about the future. We'd sit in the hallway for hours talking late into the night, whispering over the hum of the bathroom fan so our mom wouldn't hear after high school. We went to different colleges. Garrett studied finance at Washington State, and I headed to Eugene to study kinesiology. We still texted almost daily and always synced our breaks to come home together. One semester, when my living situation blew up, Garrett drove 4 hours just to help me move. No complaints, no hesitation, just showed up like he always had. After graduation, we both found jobs back home in Portland. I joined a rehab center on the east side, and he landed an analyst role at a firm downtown. We even lived just 15 minutes apart and carved out a ritual Sunday brunch at a little spot called Maple Street Cafe. Blueberry pancakes, bottomless coffee, and that corner booth by the window. It became our reset, our safe place. I was there when his 3-year relationship with Rachel fell apart. I remember watching him hold back tears one morning as he stirred cold syrup into his coffee. I was also there when my own boyfriend Derek left for his medical residency in Chicago, promising a future he never really intended to build. Garrett showed up that night with Rocky Road and an armful of action movies. We didn't even talk much, just sat side by side while the world felt like it was crumbling. 6 months after my breakup, Garrett made me promise something at brunch. "Let's never lie to each other," he said, clinking mugs. With me, even when the truth stings, I didn't know then how badly that promise would be tested. It started innocently enough. One Sunday he skipped brunch, said he was meeting someone new, a woman he'd met at a corporate mixer. Her name was Samantha Reed, a marketing executive. She sounded like the kind of person Garrett would click with. Smart, ambitious, funny. They went on a walk by the waterfront on their first date. And by the third, they were inseparable. He used my childhood nickname when he talked about her ally. "She just gets me," he said, eyes glowing. It made me happy at first to see that light in him again, but when he canceled our brunch for the 3rd time in a row because Samantha wanted to try a new place downtown, something inside me stirred. I tried to welcome her. I really did. When she joined us for brunch, I asked about her job, complimented her shoes, listened as she talked about campaign launches and focus groups. But there was something performative in the way she smiled, something practiced in the way she laughed. Then came the phone call one Tuesday evening. I asked Samantha to marry me. Garrett said, voice buzzing with excitement, and she said yes. I stared at my living room wall, the silence stretching between us on the line 5 months. I thought they hadn't even been together as long as some gym memberships. I told him, "Congratulations," because that's what you're supposed to say when your brother's happy, even if the knot in your stomach doesn't agree. The engagement dinner was planned quickly, an elegant restaurant along the Willamette River, private room, candles, chandeliers. I arrived early to help with details. Samantha walked in on Garrett's arm, glowing in a deep green dress, diamond flashing like a mirror under every light. She hugged me, said all the right things, told the room how proud she was of her future husband, but that night something shifted. Next comes the moment that broke everything wide open. The first red flag came during dinner. We were seated at a long table overlooking the river, candlelight flickering off the water. Garrett had just launched into one of his favorite stories from when we were kids, the camping trip where our tent flooded and we had to sleep in the car. It was one of those stories he loved telling, with big hand gestures and dramatic pauses. But right in the middle, Samantha reached out and touched his arm. "Remember what we talked about sweetheart dining etiquette?" she said, softly, smiling like nothing was wrong. Garrett immediately lowered his hands and adjusted his posture, continuing the story in a more subdued tone. His voice lost some of its usual warmth, and he kept glancing at her as if making sure he was still doing it right. Our dad asked him about the wedding timeline, and before Garrett could say a word, Samantha answered for both of them. "We're thinking a short engagement," she said. "No point in waiting when you found the right person." She laced her fingers through Garrett's and added, "Besides, with changes coming at his firm, it's better to be settled." That was news to me. Garrett hadn't mentioned anything about job changes. I looked at him, waiting for him to add something, but he just nodded. As the evening went on, I noticed more moments like that. Every time someone brought up a memory from childhood or asked Garrett a question, Samantha found a way to redirect the conversation. When Mom started talking about our old school plays, Samantha smiled politely and shifted the topic to the restaurant's architecture. It was subtle, but it was there. Every time the attention turned toward Garrett's past or our family, she steered it away. The next morning, I texted Garrett about brunch. It was our tradition after big events like that, just the two of us decompressing, catching up. "Can't today?" he replied hours later. "Samantha and I are looking at venues." And that became the pattern. Week after week, our brunches were postponed or canceled altogether. Sometimes she wasn't feeling well. Sometimes she surprised him with plans. Sometimes he didn't even offer a reason. When we did see each other, she came too. Our quiet corner booth became a wedding planning station. Every detail, from flowers to seating charts, took up the space where we used to just talk. I tried once to ask for a coffee catch-up, just the two of us. Garrett looked uncomfortable. "We're trying to do everything together right now," he said. Later, during a workout with my friend Emily, I brought it up cautiously. "I've noticed it too," she said, wiping sweat from her brow. "Last week at Phil's birthday, he mentioned a summer trip to her family's cabin, and she jumped in saying they couldn't go. Something about their commitments as a couple." She hesitated. "There's more," she added. "She told Julia that you've been against their relationship from the start. Said you made some comment about her being a rebound." I nearly dropped my water bottle. "I never said that." "I figured," Emily said, "but I thought you should know." It all came to a head a few weeks later when Garrett invited me to help set up for a dinner party at his apartment. I got there early and knocked, but no one answered. The door was ajar, so I stepped inside. I heard Samantha's voice from the bedroom. "How could you forget to confirm the reservation? Do I have to manage everything?" Garrett's response was quiet, apologetic. When they came out, Samantha smiled like nothing had happened. Garrett barely looked at me. He checked his phone twice before we'd even set the table. After that night, more signs began to show. Garrett stopped responding to group messages promptly. When he did, his replies sounded like they'd been filtered stiff and worded just like hers. He dropped out of poker nights with our friends, saying they were focusing on couple priorities. I tried to brush it off. Maybe it was just stress. Maybe he was adjusting to being in a serious relationship. But then over lunch one afternoon, Garrett told me they'd set a wedding date. 3 months from now, he said. I was stunned. "That soon?" I said, keeping my voice steady. "I thought you might wait until next year." "Samantha found the perfect venue with a cancellation," he said. "It's all falling into place." "Garrett," I said gently. "Are you sure this feels right? Everything's moving so fast." He stiffened. "What are you suggesting?" "Nothing bad. Just, are these decisions being made together, or are you getting swept along?" He looked down at his plate. "We're partners. We decide everything together." The conversation ended quickly after that. I knew we needed to talk properly, just the two of us, away from the noise and pressure. I chose Riverfront Coffee, one of our old places, quiet, tucked away, familiar. I texted him and asked if we could meet. He agreed, but only because Samantha had a hair appointment. That detail alone told me everything I needed to know. I got there early, found our favorite table ordered his usual. I sat waiting, running over what I wanted to say. 20 minutes later, Garrett arrived out of breath, apologizing. "Samantha needed me to drop off samples at the Planners," he said. He took a sip of coffee, then placed his phone on the table face up. Notifications lit up the screen every few minutes, each time his eyes flicked down. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "Just updates from Samantha." He forced himself to put the phone down. "You said you wanted to talk about something." "I did." I paused. "I just wanted to check in on you. We haven't had a lot of time alone lately, and I've noticed a few changes." His back straightened. "What kind of changes?" "You seem more stressed, less yourself. I barely see you without Samantha, and when I do, you're always on edge." He laughed under his breath. "That's just what happens when you're planning a wedding." "I know," I said. "But it's more than being busy. Even the way you tell stories has changed, like you're always watching for her reaction." He stared at his coffee. "She's helping me be more polished," he said. "There's nothing wrong with that." "No, not if it's what you want," I said softly. "But it feels like you're disappearing inside this relationship, like her needs and preferences are becoming your voice." His tone hardened. "You don't know what I want." "I'm just worried," I said. "Emily told me Samantha said I made a comment about her being a rebound. I never said that, Garrett." He didn't respond. "She probably misunderstood something," he finally muttered. His phone buzzed again, 3 messages in a row. "She had a rough relationship before," he said quickly. "She gets anxious when I don't reply right away. And that's why you have to check in constantly. That's not trust. That's something else," he bristled. "You don't understand our relationship." I looked at him, really looked. The brother who used to show up without being asked now seemed afraid to make a single move without permission. "Garrett," I said quietly, "you're not just compromising, you're being controlled." His voice rose. "You think Samantha's some kind of villain? Maybe you're just jealous. I'm not at your beck and call anymore." The words hit hard. "This isn't about me. It's about what I'm seeing." "Enough." He stood abrupt. "I thought you'd be happy for me, but instead you're trying to destroy the best thing that's ever happened to me." He left without another word. I sat there alone, his coffee barely touched across from mine. What happened next would change everything between us. The next morning, I called Dr. Grace Milton and left a message. I hadn't spoken to her since the winter after Derek moved away, but this felt heavier than anything I'd gone through before. She called me back before lunch and cleared an hour for that same afternoon. "You're not overreacting," she said gently after I'd explained what happened at the coffee shop. "People don't always want to hear what they're not ready to see, especially from the person who knows them best." I stayed quiet, letting her words settle. "It's normal to question yourself after a conversation like that," she added. "But what you described, changes in behavior withdrawal from family intense control over communication, that's not healthy compromise. That's isolation." I left her office that day with instructions not to chase Garrett. Give him space. Let him know I'm still here, still open. But don't push. The next week felt longer than any week I could remember. I wrote and deleted a dozen texts. I checked his social media, but there were no new posts, not even engagement updates. It was like he'd gone quiet all over again. 8 days passed before I heard from him. "Sorry about last week. Thinking about what you said. Maybe some valid points, but delivery was harsh. Samantha and I, working on communication, could use help with wedding stuff if you're still open. Miss you." The message didn't sound quite like him. It was too polished, too structured. But it was an invitation, and I wasn't going to ignore it. "I miss you too. I'm sorry if I came across the wrong way. Happy to help with whatever you need." I wrote back. We met for lunch a few days later. It was short, awkward. He avoided the subject entirely, like our last conversation hadn't happened. He asked if I could help assemble wedding favors the next weekend. I said yes. As I was driving home, something in the back of my mind kept tugging. His tone, the way he'd shifted the topic every time things got close to real. He hadn't truly heard me, he was just managing the situation. Later that evening, a news alert popped up on my phone. Normally I swipe those away without a second glance, but this time a name stopped me cold. Ethan Brooks, arrested for violating a restraining order. The name sounded familiar. I remembered Samantha mentioning an ex-boyfriend named Ethan during the engagement dinner. She'd described him as obsessive, someone who'd spread lies about her after the breakup. Curiosity gave way to something more urgent. I opened a browser and searched his name. Court records, articles, public commentary. Something wasn't lining up. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how quickly things had changed with Garrett, how isolated he'd become, and how every time I tried to talk to him, he seemed further away. The next morning, I stopped at Daybreak Cafe before work. I was halfway through a cup of coffee when a woman approached my table. "Excuse me," she said, her voice cautious. "Are you Allison Parker Garrett's sister?" I looked up. She was in her early 30s, maybe a few years older than me, with tired eyes and a nervous energy in her voice. "Yes," I said slowly. "Do we know each other?" "I'm Hannah Lewis. I used to be Samantha's roommate." She sat down before I could say anything else. I wasn't sure if I should say anything she said, folding a napkin in her lap. But when I saw the engagement post on Garrett's page, I felt sick. I couldn't stay quiet. My heart started pounding. She did the same thing to Ethan, she continued, moved fast, said all the right things, then slowly started cutting him off from everyone he cared about. Over the next 45 minutes, Hannah told me everything. About the lies, the isolation, the false claims of abuse, the credit card fraud. Samantha, or whoever she really was, had left behind a trail of people who'd tried to warn others and ended up accused themselves. Ethan tried to go to the police, Hannah said. She filed a restraining order before he could even show them the evidence. It was preemptive, strategic. She slid her phone across the table, showing me messages, screenshots, dates. "She's done this before. I think she's doing it again. And your brother is next." I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. "I can connect you with Ethan," Hannah said, "or at least his friend Mark. He has everything saved." We exchanged contact information. She left and I sat there for several minutes unsure of what to do next. That night I started digging. I searched every credential Samantha had mentioned, her job titles, her college degree, the house in Bellevue she said she'd grown up in. Nothing checked out. There were no employment records at the marketing firm she claimed, no mention of her in Northwestern's alumni directory. The address she'd listed as her childhood home belonged to an entirely different family. And then there were the court records, sealed documents that suggested more than just financial mistakes. I saved everything. The next morning I called our parents and asked if they could come by that weekend. I didn't want to talk about it over the phone. When they arrived, I opened the laptop and showed them what I'd found. My dad sat back in silence, arms crossed, reading slowly. My mom leaned forward, frowning with every new detail. "If even half of this is true," my dad said quietly, "Garrett's in serious trouble. He won't believe it without proof," my mom said. "You know how defensive he's been." "I'm still waiting to talk to Ethan," I said. "But I wanted you to see it. In case this spirals further." We agreed to stay quiet for now. They would try to spend more time with Garrett without tipping Samantha off. I would keep gathering documentation. 3 days later, Mark Delaney called me. He'd sent over the court documents, Ethan's restraining order, the dismissed case, and emails he'd saved, showing how Samantha had turned their entire friend group against him. "It started small," Mark explained. "Little comments she said he made behind her back. Then suddenly, everyone believed he was unstable. I thanked him, hung up, and began putting everything together." That afternoon, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Samantha. She was alone, smiling. "Thought I'd drop off the fabric swatches," she said when I opened the door. She sat down on the couch like we were old friends. For 20 minutes we talked about dresses and centerpieces. Her tone was pleasant, her words practiced. Then she changed. "I know you've been talking to Hannah," she said, voice still calm. "That woman is a liar. She stole from me. I had to report her." I said nothing. "You're digging into my past, trying to sabotage our wedding." She walked around the living room, pausing at a picture of Garrett and me. "He talks about this one all the time." Then she turned her eyes cold. "If you keep pushing, I'll show him the messages Hannah sent. I'll tell him what you're doing. You want him to lose everything? Because I will protect what we have." She smiled again, the friendly mask sliding back into place. "I hope you like the swatches," she said. "We really do want you standing with us." When she left, I sat still for a long time, the envelope of fabric samples untouched beside me. The next morning, I packed everything into a folder, documents, screenshots, names, timelines, and sent Garrett a message. "Can we meet at Lincoln Park tomorrow at 4? Just us." He replied 4 hours later. "Okay. Everything all right. Just need to talk. Brother to sister." And that was how I prepared for the most important conversation of our lives. I got to Lincoln Park half an hour early. It was one of those warm spring afternoons that made everything feel slower and quieter. I walked the gravel path toward the duck pond past the same old trees Garrett and I used to climb as kids. We'd spent whole summers running through that park like it belonged to us. It felt like the only place left where the truth might still land right. I picked a bench close to the water and sat down. My shoulder bag held the folder documents, screenshots, court filings, even a short letter I'd written the night before. I wasn't sure if I'd hand it to him or just talk. I rehearsed both options in my head as people strolled by with dogs, with kids with strollers. I didn't hear her approach, but her shadow crossed the edge of the bench before I looked up. Samantha. She stood a few feet away, arms crossed, no sign of surprise on her face. "Garrett's running late," she said. "He asked me to come ahead and let you know." My stomach turned. Garrett would have texted me himself. That lie was careless. "I don't believe you," I said. She stepped forward, voice still calm. "Doesn't really matter what you believe. I know why you wanted to meet him here. I saw the files." She looked at the bag next to me. "I don't know what you think this is going to do," she said, "but you're wasting your time. Garrett's already made his choice. He deserves to know the truth," I said. "What he does with it is up to him." Her face tightened. "You mean the truth according to Hannah, according to Ethan. You've been chasing down the past like it's some kind of game. None of that is real. They're bitter, unstable. You're being played. They gave me documents," I said. "Evidence. It's all in the folder. I've checked every piece." She gave a small, cold smile. "You really think Garrett will choose your version of events over me, over the life we've built together? He deserves to decide for himself," I said. Her voice dropped. "You always wanted to be the center of his life. That's the problem, isn't it?" She stepped closer. "He told me how clingy you used to be, how you never gave his other relationships a chance." I stood up. "This conversation is between me and Garrett." She didn't move. "He's not coming," she said, the calm in her voice cracking. "I read your message. I know what you planned. You're reading his texts," I asked. "I'm protecting what we've built. You're trying to poison it." She reached for the strap of my bag. "Don't," I said. "Let go." Her hand tightened around the bag. "You've been a problem since day one," she said. "Always watching, always judging." "I'm done playing nice." She yanked hard. I pulled back, trying to keep my balance. We stumbled near the edge of the concrete steps that led down toward the lower pond. "You're hurting me," I said. "Then let go." She shoved me. It happened fast. My foot missed the step, and I felt the ground shift beneath me. My arm reached for anything to grab, but there was nothing but air. Then the fall. My shoulder hit first, then my head. I heard the crack before I felt the pain. I tumbled down the steps, finally landing on my side. The world spun, and everything sounded muffled. Samantha walked down slowly, still holding the bag. She knelt beside me. "Look what you made me do," she said. I couldn't speak. My mouth opened, but no words came out. Warmth trickled down my temple. Blood. "If you keep this up," she said, "next time will be worse. Stay away from Garrett. Stay away from our life." She stood looking down at me. Then she turned toward the top of the steps. "Hey," a voice called out. "Is someone down there?" I blinked toward the sound. A woman in workout clothes appeared at the top of the stairs. She jogged down as Samantha turned suddenly frantic. "Oh my God!" Samantha cried. "She fell down the stairs. I think she hit her head." The woman knelt beside me and touched my arm gently. "Don't move," she said. "I'm calling 911. I tried to speak again, tried to say her name, but the pain was pulling everything away. Samantha leaned down one more time. "Remember what I said," she whispered. Then she turned to the woman. "I need to call her brother right away. This is terrible." She pulled out her phone, pacing a few feet away, pretending to be distressed. Meanwhile, the woman stayed with me, keeping my head supported. "My name's Lauren," she said. "You're okay. Just stay with me." The sirens came next, then the darkness. I woke up in a hospital bed with a bandage on my forehead and my arm in a sling. A doctor explained I had a dislocated shoulder, a concussion, and 6 stitches just above my eyebrow. My vision was still a little blurry. My head ached. But I was awake. 2 police officers came that evening. I gave them my statement. I told them exactly what happened. I told them it wasn't an accident. My parents arrived that night from Arizona. They sat quietly as I recounted the fall, the struggle, the warning Samantha whispered afterward. Garrett didn't come. The next afternoon I got a text. "I know what happened. Samantha told me everything. How could you do that? She's pregnant, Allison. You could have killed our baby. Stay away from us." I stared at the screen. Samantha had reversed the story. I was the attacker. She was the victim. And now she was pregnant. My hand went cold holding the phone. It slipped from my fingers and landed on the blanket. My mom picked it up and read the message silently. Neither of us spoke. The next few days passed in slow pieces. My dad made phone calls. My mom helped me with the neurologist's follow-up. I barely ate. My arm throbbed with every movement, but the pain in my chest was worse. Garrett truly believed I had attacked his fiancée. Emily came to visit. She brought clean clothes and a few things from my apartment. "He's not thinking clearly," she said, "but that doesn't mean he won't eventually see it." "I'm not sure that matters anymore," I told her. But even as I said it, a small part of me refused to let go. The police told me they were investigating. They asked about witnesses, about cameras, about prior behavior. Detective Carla Rhodes gave me her card and said they were doing what they could. I spent a week in the hospital, then moved in temporarily with Emily. My apartment had too many stairs, and I couldn't manage them alone. A nurse wheeled me out to the car. I watched people pass by the hospital entrance, visitors' staff, people carrying coffee or flowers. I kept waiting for Garrett's face to appear in the crowd. It never did. Back at Emily's, the walls felt quiet. I slept too much, or not at all. I skipped meals. Sometimes I sat by the window with a blanket over my legs and just watched the sky turn gray. My shoulder would heal. The bruises would fade. But the silence from my brother was something else entirely. And somewhere across the city, Samantha was planning a wedding, telling a story where I was the jealous, violent sister who couldn't let go. But she didn't know everything yet, and I wasn't finished. Emily helped me settle into her guest room the day I was discharged. My right arm was still in a sling, and the concussion left me tired and light-sensitive. She'd taken a week off work to make sure I wasn't alone, even rearranged her living room so I wouldn't need to climb stairs. "Whatever I needed," she said, "just ask." I didn't ask for much. Most days I stayed under a blanket on the couch, trying to sleep through the headaches. Food tasted like paper. Noise made my head throb. I didn't want to talk about the wedding or Samantha or Garrett's text. I didn't want to talk at all. My parents flew back to Arizona after the 3rd night, promising to call every day. They kept their word. My mom would check on my pain meds. My dad would ask if I'd heard anything from Garrett. I hadn't. Detective Rhodes stopped by at the end of that first week. She had follow-up questions about what Samantha said before and after the fall. She asked if I remembered what kind of shoes she wore, if she had a bag with her, if I'd seen any cameras near the steps. "No visible ones," I said. "There was a bookstore across the street, but I don't know if they have outdoor surveillance." "We'll look into it," she said, writing it down. "I believe you, Allison. But without a witness or footage, the case is difficult." She left her card again on the coffee table and promised to stay in touch. By the end of the 2nd week, I was able to shower without help and walk down to the mailbox. That small progress was a win, but it didn't make the silence from Garrett any easier. Emily tried to keep my spirits up. She brought puzzles, cooked casseroles, let me cry when I needed to, and changed the subject when I didn't want to feel anything. Then came the worst night. I woke up around 3 a.m., soaked in sweat, arm throbbing. I'd had a dream about the fall, about Samantha standing over me with that cold, level stare. It felt so real I had to check my bandages to remind myself it was over. I walked to the kitchen in the dark, poured a glass of water, and stood by the sink until the shaking in my hands stopped. That morning I called Dr. Milton. She made time for me that afternoon. I don't know what else to do, I told her. He believes I attacked her, and now she's saying she's pregnant. You've done everything someone in your position could do, she said. You gathered the truth. You tried to protect him. I didn't say anything. She leaned forward. But now you have to choose what you do with that truth. Whether or not Garrett's ready to hear it. I feel like I failed, I said. Like I let her win. You haven't failed, she said. You're still standing, Allison. That matters. After the session, I went back to Emily's apartment and opened my laptop. I pulled up every file I'd saved. The background checks, court records, screenshots, testimonies from Hannah and Ethan and Mark, the police report from the hospital, my discharge papers. Then I opened a new document and began organizing it: dates, names, timelines. I wrote short notes under each item, making it clear and simple. I wasn't writing it to convince Garrett of anything. I was writing it because he deserved to see what I had seen. It took 3 days. Emily helped me scan and format it into a single file. She added a cover sheet and saved it to a password-protected folder. When we finished, I sat on her sofa and stared at the blinking cursor on my phone. I wrote the message 4 times before I sent it. Garrett, I love you too much to stay quiet. Please read this. No one else will see it but you. If you still want me gone after, I'll respect that. But you need to know who she really is. I attached the file. Then I set the phone down and walked away. The wedding was 2 weeks away. Every day that passed without a reply was its own kind of silence. Then, on a rainy Thursday night, someone knocked on Emily's door. She was at the store. I was alone. I opened the peephole. It was Garrett, soaked to the skin, pale, shoulders slumped like something heavy had finally dropped. I opened the door. He didn't speak at first, just looked at me. His eyes were rimmed red and his hair dripped onto his coat. Allie, he said, barely above a whisper. I stepped back and let him in. He walked past me into the living room. I followed, unsure of what to say. He stood there for a moment, staring at the books on the shelf, the folded blankets on the couch. Then he turned around. I saw the video, he said. Detective Rhodes came by yesterday. She showed me. I said nothing, just listened. She said a bookstore camera caught the moment. Not everything, but enough. It showed her pushing you. His voice cracked on the word pushing. I didn't believe it at first, he said. I watched it 4 times. I didn't move. Then I read your email, he said. Everything. The evidence, the notes, Hannah's statement, Ethan's messages. It was all there. He dropped onto the couch like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. She lied to me, he said, about everything. The pregnancy, the job, her past. She even changed her name, Allie. He buried his face in his hands. I told you to stay away. I accused you of hurting her. I thought you were jealous. And all this time, you were the one trying to protect me. He didn't look up. I'm so sorry, he said. I don't know how to fix this. I walked over and sat beside him. The room stayed quiet for a while. You came, I said. He nodded. I couldn't ignore it anymore. We didn't talk about the wedding. We didn't talk about Samantha's arrest or what would happen next. That would come later. For now he was here, and that was enough. Garrett stayed for hours that night. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, the file folder still open between us. Neither of us reached for it again. He had already read everything. What we needed now wasn't more proof, it was space to understand what it all meant. I confronted her the same day, he said after a long pause. I didn't even call. I just drove to the apartment. He rubbed his eyes. She was in the kitchen when I got there, acting like nothing had changed. I told her I'd seen the footage, that I knew everything now. I waited, letting him take his time. She didn't deny it at first, he said. She just froze, like a part of her shut off. Then she started talking fast, saying the video didn't show the full story, that you'd lunged first, that she was scared. He looked down at his hands. When that didn't work, she changed tactics again. She cried, said the stress from the wedding and her hormones made her act out, that she didn't remember pushing you. Hormones, I asked gently. She claimed she was pregnant, he said, but I asked her to come with me the next morning to the doctor just to be sure everything was okay. That's when she snapped. His voice grew quieter. She threw a vase, screamed that I didn't trust her, said I was ungrateful, told me she could have had someone better but chose to settle for me. He didn't look at me when he said it, but I saw the way his shoulders curled inward. She said everyone in my life had turned against her because they were jealous. You, Emily, even my coworkers. She made it sound like the whole world was conspiring to ruin her happiness. I reached for the glass of water on the coffee table and handed it to him. He didn't take it right away. Everything I thought I knew. It's like it cracked open, he said. She told me you said terrible things. She showed me fake screenshots once said they were from you. I didn't even question it. You trusted her, I said. That's not your fault. She had me text her during our conversations, he continued. She said it was to remember little things I mentioned, but it was more than that. She was monitoring the words I used, how fast I replied. She'd quiz me afterward, ask what you said if you looked suspicious. I listened heart-heavy. She picked out my clothes for work, told me which coworkers to avoid. She even pushed me to change my insurance and list her as a beneficiary, said it was just future planning. He shook his head. I thought I was being thoughtful, responsible, but she was isolating me, bit by bit. We sat in silence for a while. Rain tapped against the window. The police called later that day, he said they were bringing her in again. She didn't show up. Turns out she packed a bag and left town. The next morning, they tracked her through hotel security footage in Vancouver. She ran, I said softly. He nodded. And when they booked her, they found out her real name isn't Samantha Reed. I looked at him, not surprised. She's Natalie Chambers. She had a warrant out of Seattle fraud credit card theft, a sealed case involving financial impersonation. Detective Rhodes said she'd been using aliases for years, targeting men usually in finance or medicine. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the weight of it all land. She's in custody now, he said. No bail. She's being charged with felony assault identity fraud and multiple counts from earlier cases. I finally exhaled. She won't hurt anyone else, I said. Garrett leaned back, eyes unfocused. I keep replaying that day in my head, the day I sent you that message from the hospital. I told you to stay away from us. I told you. She was pregnant. I didn't interrupt. He needed to say it. I thought I was defending the person I loved, he said, but I was attacking the one who's always had my back. We sat there until Emily came home with groceries. She froze when she saw Garrett. Hey, he said, standing up awkwardly. She looked at me. I gave a small nod. I'll get started on dinner, she said, giving us space. After she stepped into the kitchen, Garrett turned to me. I'm staying at a hotel for now. I moved out yesterday. I nodded. I started therapy too, he added. Just one session, but it helped. I placed my hand over his on the couch. That's a good place to start. He nodded again, this time without speaking. The next few days moved slowly. Garrett stayed in touch. He came by once with takeout once just to sit in the park with me. The energy between us was still tender, still cautious, but it was real. The following week, Detective Rhodes called with an update. The DA was moving forward. Natalie had agreed to a plea deal, 4 years in prison, restitution to victims, no possibility of early release. She's not fighting it, Rhodes said. Might be the first honest decision she's made in years. After the call, I sat on the back porch for a long time, watching the sky change from gold to gray. Garrett came by that evening. We took a walk around the neighborhood, not saying much. He paused once in front of a small bookstore. You know what's strange, he asked. What I used to think real love meant making sacrifices, adjusting, compromising. He looked at me. But real love doesn't shrink your world. It doesn't cut you off. It makes room for family, for truth, even when it's hard. We stood there for a minute, just breathing in the quiet. Then he smiled a little. I'm not there yet, but I'm getting better at seeing things clearly. I gave his arm a gentle nudge. You're doing more than seeing clearly. You're learning how to stand again. He nodded. So are you. We turned toward the next block, our steps falling back into sync. The week Natalie accepted the plea deal, Garrett came with me to my follow-up appointment at the orthopedic clinic. He waited in the lobby with a book he wasn't reading, fingers tapping against his coffee cup. When I came out with a clean bill of progress and a new exercise band for my shoulder, he stood up and smiled. How's the mobility, he asked. Better than expected, I said. Still some weakness, but it's coming back. We walked slowly to the car. The air was cool and a few early leaves had started falling across the sidewalk. He held the door for me, then walked around to the driver's side without speaking. We drove in silence for a few blocks before he asked if I wanted to grab lunch. That afternoon, in a quiet booth at a sandwich shop off Hawthorne, Garrett told me he'd decided not to return to the apartment he'd shared with Natalie. He had terminated the lease and moved into a small studio for now, just a temporary space while he figured things out. I needed somewhere that was just mine, he said. No shared decor, no shadow of her. He had also started attending a support group for men who'd experienced psychological abuse or manipulation in relationships. It wasn't easy, he said, but it helped. Most of the guys don't even talk at first, he explained. They just sit there and listen. One guy came 3 times before saying a word. I nodded. Sometimes listening is the first step. He looked down at his hands. I still don't trust my judgment. It's like, I don't know how I missed so much. We didn't rush through lunch. We talked about small things, his work, my schedule, Emily's new rescue dog. And when we parted, it didn't feel heavy. It just felt real. 2 weeks later, I returned to the rehab center. My caseload was lighter at first, just 2 patients a day, while I eased back in. I was surprised how natural it felt to be back in that space. The scent of eucalyptus balm, the soft whir of resistance machines. Even the sound of someone grumbling through stretches it all reminded me I was still me. At home I began writing again. Nothing formal, just reflections. Pages of thoughts I hadn't spoken aloud. Emily read one of them over coffee and told me to consider sharing it with the domestic violence organization she volunteered with. They're always looking for real stories, she said, especially from people who've been through it quietly. I wasn't ready to speak publicly, but I offered to help behind the scenes editing brochures, writing copy for their website, even reviewing grant letters. It gave me purpose during the evenings, something productive that wasn't centered around my own pain. One night Garrett called and asked if we could meet for brunch again. It had been months since we'd sat in our corner booth at Maple Street Cafe. I wasn't sure if I was ready, but I said yes anyway. That Sunday, I wore a simple navy sweater and tied my hair back with a clip Garrett had once given me for Christmas. When I walked in, he was already seated sipping coffee and glancing toward the door. He stood when he saw me. I asked for the window table, he said. They remembered us. We ordered our usual blueberry pancakes, for me scrambled eggs and sourdough for him. The waitress didn't comment on our long absence. She just smiled and brought extra napkins. I've been thinking about something Garrett said, stirring his coffee slowly. About trust, not just in other people, in myself. I waited. I used to think I was careful, smart, that I could spot red flags. You were careful, I said. She was just very good at hiding the flags. He shook his head gently. I think I wanted to believe in the story she told, because it felt easier than questioning everything. He set down his spoon. But I've been working on that. In group, in therapy, trying to rebuild my compass. I smiled across the table. You're doing it, I said. He reached for his coffee mug and raised it in a quiet toast. To trusting your instincts, he said. I lifted mine. And to having people who tell you the truth, especially when it hurts. We clinked mugs lightly. As the meal went on, the conversation drifted to future plans. Garrett was considering taking a few weeks off work and visiting our parents in Arizona. He'd already spoken to them about everything. They had offered quiet support, not judgment. They said they missed the version of me who used to call just to say hi, he said. I want to find that version again. Back at home, I opened my laptop and drafted a short piece for the organization's newsletter. I wrote about control that looks like care, about manipulation that wears the mask of love. I didn't name Natalie. I didn't need to. A few nights later, Garrett came over to help Emily install new light fixtures. Afterward, we all sat on the porch drinking hot cider from mismatched mugs. There's a guy in my group, Garrett said, who said something the other day I can't stop thinking about. He paused. He said, the first time someone isolates you, it feels like love. The second time, it feels like loneliness. We sat with that thought a while. Fall had arrived in full. The leaves on the maple trees were turning gold. The wind carried a chill now, but it wasn't sharp. It just felt honest. You know, Garrett said, looking out toward the sidewalk, I think real love makes room for more love, not less. I didn't reply right away, because I knew what he meant, and I knew what was coming next. A few weeks later, Garrett and I returned to Lincoln Park. It was his idea. He brought a thermos of coffee and a bag of cinnamon rolls from the bakery near his new place. We sat on the same bench by the duck pond, the one where I'd waited alone that afternoon, folder in hand. This time, the quiet didn't feel heavy. We watched the water ripple as a few mallards drifted across the surface. A family walked by with a stroller, and Garrett handed me a paper cup filled with steaming coffee. "I come here sometimes now," he said, eyes still on the pond. "Not to relive anything, just to remind myself how far things have shifted." I nodded. My shoulder was mostly healed, though certain motions still gave me pause. The scar above my temple had faded into a faint line just visible if the light hit right. But some changes weren't meant to disappear. They were meant to stay to remind you what you'd lived through and what you'd stood up to. Garrett took a deep breath. I still get flashes of her voice. Not words exactly, just the feeling, the pressure to perform, the way she'd twist something small into something shameful. He looked at me then. "Thank you for not walking away, even when I pushed you to." I didn't answer right away. I just reached over and squeezed his hand. "You would have done the same for me," I said. We stayed like that for a while, drinking coffee, watching the wind rustle through the trees. The leaves were falling faster now, bright yellow and faded red drifting to the ground in slow spirals. Later that afternoon, we stopped by my place so Garrett could help hang a new set of shelves. He used to do things like that without thinking, but now there was a kind of reverence in his movements, a carefulness, not out of guilt, but out of respect. The following week, he started mentoring at the support group. Nothing formal. Just showing up early, staying late, talking one-on-one with the men who sat silently along the back wall. He said it helped. Not just them, but him too. As for me, I kept volunteering with the domestic violence organization. I co-wrote a series of articles on invisible abuse control, without bruises, manipulation, masked as devotion. For the first time in a long time, I felt steady in my work, not just professionally, but personally. I was helping people find language for the things that often go unnamed. One Sunday morning, Garrett and I met again at Maple Street Cafe. The waitress greeted us with a familiar smile and set down 2 mugs without asking. "Glad to see you two again," she said. Garrett raised his mug. "To the people who tell you the truth," he said. I lifted mine. "And to the ones who eventually hear it." We clinked gently, letting the sound settle between us. Somewhere in the middle of that meal, it hit me. Healing isn't about going back to what used to be. It's about building something stronger on the other side of the wreckage, piece by piece, word by word, brunch by brunch. Real love, the kind that lasts, never isolates. It makes room. It holds steady. And it always finds its way back. If you've ever had to watch someone you love disappear into someone else's story, if you've ever stood in the quiet and told the truth anyway, know that your voice matters. Thank you for walking this road with me. And if this story stayed with you, I'd love for you to share it with someone who might need to hear it today.